Good evening. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to News in Focus. My name is Faraz Patel. We'd like to thank you, the viewer, for staying with us here on Hilaal TV, DSTV channel 347. It's good news on the power front for the country. South Africans can look forward to a load-shedding-free summer season, with power utility Eskom announcing that it does not forecast the implementations of the rolling power cuts from this month to the end of March next year. This after the power utility supplied electricity to South Africans for 97% of the winter period, with only 26 hours of load shedding recorded over 4 evenings during that period. Joining me now to discuss this, I'd like to welcome Eric Shunmugam, who is the Eskom General Manager in the Office of the Group Executive for Generation. Mr. Shunmugam, always good having you on. Thank you so much for joining us here on News in Focus on Hilaal TV.
Greetings for us, and thank you for having me. I want to also, greet our fellow South Africans.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. Mr. Shunmugam, as mentioned by Minister Dr. Kgosientsho Ramokgopa, he says that this is the end of structural load shedding. How have we got here in terms of ending it from this structural perspective?
Raz, thank you for that. I think if you remember from our previous interviews, Generation had put in place a recovery plan. It was also one of the first priorities of the Energy Action Plan. This recovery plan was approved by the board in March of 2023. And over 3 years, we had committed to actually recover 6,000 megawatts. And when you really look at that 6,000 megawatts, we had identified 6 priority power stations, and later on a further 2 where we were going to actually recover those megawatts. And the program was about capacity recovery. And I'm glad to report that through those very structural focused interventions at these stations, focusing across plant being the first aspect, the issues around processes, enabling processes, and that's where we look towards, changing some of the governance processes without breaching governance, but the delegation issues between Eskom and our national treasury. And then lastly, the aspect on people, big focus on people, reinstilling the culture and rebuilding the capability and capacity, but bringing back competence. So the focus was on these 6 stations, and I'm happy to report for us, when we announced the summer outlook, these stations, I think, are performing exceptionally well. To surface the 2 stations that were giving us issues, Tutuka, which had many units, a lot of drama around that station. And if you look at Duva, these stations are now producing in excess of 80% energy availability on a daily basis. So we've definitely had great wins. I think when you look at Kusile, we unfortunately had the incident on the stacks, once again performing very well. So those 6 stations are performing extremely well. We've been able to recover the 6,000 megawatts. And as we committed in the last leg, was to bring back a further 2,500 megawatts. As you're aware, we're on the verge now. Kusile 6 has come in, it's synchronized. And then the last part of the 2.5 would be Kuberg. Kuberg's plan to come in at the end of this month, and then that will give us that headroom to have a good summer moving forward.
Yeah, and I want to touch on the 2,000 megawatts because the importance, or how important is the benefit of that extra 2,000. And when listening to Minister Dr. Ramokgopa, we are ahead of the 13,000 megawatt achievement. Talk to us about that.
So for us, I think very critical, when we go into summer, that's when we actually do our maintenance, right? That's when we plan our maintenance. Now, over the last 2 years, we had a very different phenomena. We know that comes between December and January, February, March, it's the rainy seasons. But what we've seen over the last 2 years is the intensity of these rains have really got us on the back foot. And what this 2,000 extra megawatts does is it actually does allow for these, rainfall patterns that's beyond our control to say, well, what we've seen in the past, we have multiple unit trips. And the challenge with these hard rainfalls is that it starts to affect the mine, and then you got your inflows of your coal coming through, affecting the coal quality, wet coal, um, and the net result is then we end up actually tripping plant. So this additional 2,000 megawatts in context works out to at least an additional 3 units that we will have, available to cater for these unplanned events. So we'll be better prepared for the summer.
This year, Mr. Shunmugam, I think both you and I can agree, and many South Africans can agree, that this is quite an intense winter. Many cold evenings, many cold days, snow in some parts of the country. So given that, how much of a milestone was it that we only, as South Africans, had 26 hours of load shedding? And that meant, if you want to break it down, 4 evenings, and it allowed for 97% electricity supply.
So for us, I think in the context of where we've come from, this is huge. I mean, if you really go back 3 years, we had 329 days of load shedding. Can you imagine, what all of us were going through as South Africans, but more importantly for us as, the guardians of Eskom. So this is huge. And I think when you really look at, the root cause of those 26 hours, which actually we measure days, so it's 4 days, but, it's actually equivalent to 1 day if you think about it. It just meant for those days, we were caught unawares in terms of there was unusual weather patterns, which we'll guard against moving forward. But we also ended up with the second important scenario. There were 2 major stations at Duva and at Tutuka. There were some huge defects that we had to take these stations out, and we took advantage of the low demand when industry closed actually in December. Sadly, these units actually went into slip, and as a result, our slip profile was, averaging between 2.5 and 3,000. So unfortunately, those 4 days, resulted in 6 incidents. But we are now comfortable that we've got enough headroom to overcome this. And as I said, the one thing we can't predict is these weather patterns. We are seeing the changing phenomena, but I believe with our rain readiness programs, we'll be much more prepared. And especially with our stations now performing in excess of, in the recent weeks, between above 70%, I think we're in a good space.
Before we go to the break, Mr. Shunmugam, the 23-24 summer, we had 176 days of load shedding. The following summer, we had the following year was a recovery, I beg your pardon, of 13 days. As we stand right now, and of course, hence the reason for this interview, we are sitting on 0 days. I mean, that's a massive progress, isn't it?
As you were posing your question, I sort of getting gooseflesh because I've been with this team for many years, and we've gone through some extreme lows. So I think for Eskom, for those that are in the front end, the 42,000 people, the many in generation that have been working long hours, this is major. It's a major victory as we move forward. I know as an Eskom group, there were a lot of naysayers, but I think expected from the country. But I think we definitely in a better space. We can plan better. The hard work that we've done in terms of the planned maintenance, the knock-on effect we took 2 years ago when we made a conscious effort to do more maintenance and we did load shed more. We're now starting to see the benefits of that planned maintenance. So very good news for us and the country for us.
After the break, I continue my conversation with Eric Shunmugam from Eskom. We're going to be asking the question, and I think it's one that South Africans are eagerly anticipating as it stands right now. Very good news still, but what about the permanent way going forward? Will South Africa be load shedding free soon? My conversation continues after the break. Welcome back to News in Focus. I'm still in conversation with Eric Shunmugam, who is the Eskom General Manager in the Office of the Group Executive for Generation. Again, thank you so much for staying with us, Mr. Shunmugam. Mr. Dan Morokane mentioned that the utility has seen a major improvement in the generation fleet. How important was this ongoing recovery and structural improvements, especially given what we have seen over the last decade in terms of power supply?
For us, I think huge for the country and for the company. I think what's important in terms of these structural changes, specifically around the performance, we now move into a different mode. We move from a mode of capacity recovery, where we now have the space. And as I said, now the focus is on sustainability and reliability. I think critical to this is Medupi 4 has come back, adding 800 megawatts. Kusile 6, towards the end of the year, will be actually also commercially operated into the organization, giving you another 800. And then Kuberg 1, which comes back. So that gives you the 2,500. So I think in terms of the focus area, and this is being led by the group executive, Beki Kumalo, now the focus is on outage excellence, outage performance, outage execution. We've seen in the last 2 years when we did take advantage over the lower demand season, starting with the school holidays and plant shutdowns, industry shutdowns in December, we obviously took advantage of doing more maintenance. Sadly, these units didn't return on time. And so how do we learn from that? The first thing that we do is we've now flattened the planned maintenance profile. It does mean, it gives us a bit more headspace. We've got between, the increased availability, reduced breakdowns, and also reducing a bit of planned maintenance. I think in terms of planned maintenance, the majority of the fleet is behind us because we've taken the last 3 years. And I know we have not hit that 70% as committed to the country, but we are now in that space where we are performing at around 70%. This, I think, for us, it bodes well. It gives us the opportunity to actually now zoom into the root causes of units coming back on late. We also now are beefing up our relationships with our OEMs and with utility type of support. Companies that have done this, that are now partnering with us, and they are actually actively involved as we move forward, also helping us through the outage season to improve the outage performance. And that would be, I think, critical in seeing this mode moving from capacity recovery into sustainability and reliability.
You mentioned Kuberg. They set to add an additional 930 megawatts at the end of this month. And I think for anyone who's probably hasn't driven past Kuberg, it's a beautiful drive to the Western Cape West Coast. But this power station, I'd like to call it the unsung hero in electricity supply. How has this power station really become or had that tag of being one of those just to supply this amount of megawatts to the grid to allow for this 0 days of load shedding, which we're about to experience?
So I think Kuberg, for us, if you really look at the last 2 years, the first challenge that we had was we had to upgrade the generators. And it came with some challenges. But in upgrading the generators and in doing the long-term operation mods, we were able to get Kuberg Unit 1 extended by another 20 years. And let me start off by saying Kuberg, produces cheap electricity, produces clean electricity, and as you said, operates quietly in the background. So if you're really looking at true baseload, nuclear is true baseload. Once Kuberg Unit 1 comes on, we are hopeful that Kuberg Unit 2 will go through the regulatory processes and will get that extension as well for another further 20 years. That allows these two stations then to continue providing reliable electricity to the grid at a very, very cheap cost. And I think what's important as well with Kuberg, we've got some very competent, staff working at the station to ensure that we can get the desired outcome in terms of reliability for that station.
And of course, the necessity of it being clean energy, given that it's on the coast, stressing the importance with regards to that. Mr. Shunmugam, there is a caveat as we speak, and this comes, of course, from boardroom level. Minister Ramokgopa mentioned that when decisions and the difficult decisions comes from the executive authority and the decision makers, which is, of course, yourself, the likes of Mr. Nkomalo, the likes of Mr. Marokane. And it's very rare, and I'm going to say to you here, Mr. Shunmugam, I don't pass compliments a lot to especially boardroom levels of power utilities, but I must say it feels very different this time around, and there has to be a credit to this current Eskom leadership. And do you feel that this current leadership of the power utility has done enough to redevelop its relationship with the public, given the current energy availability we have? You look 10 or 15 years ago, the public had lost complete trust with Eskom because load shedding affects the public. It affects everything we do as citizens of this country. Talk to us about that, because that's where it is, the relationship with the public and the electricity supply that is needed for the public.
Raz, I think to start off with, when you really look at the appointment of the minister, his vision and his view, he started off as being the so-called project manager with oversight, the appointment of the new board, then the appointment of this EXCO. But prior to that was the appointment of, Bheki Khumalo, who ensured that he put the right management at the power stations, the complex stations with the most competent power station general managers. So having this collective, I think, has given the momentum in terms of starting this whole, process of getting back the morale, boosting the morale, getting people all excited and energized. And I think the work has started. I think if you speak to Eskom's leadership, there's still work to be done in terms of ensuring we can actually maintain and sustain this culture. For me, what is very gratifying is to see the amount of individuals now wanting to come back to Eskom. Those that have left in those painful years, they're starting to see, the good work that's being done. They're starting to see what Eskom does as a company for the country. And when you really look at your assets, we tend to undermine people. So leadership for me is so critical. And if you get the right leadership with the right value systems, having the right, let's say, focus for the country, we then start to see this cascade down the levels. And I can tell you, having worked in this company for many years, I feel the difference. I come to work, there's excitement because of the leadership and the way they lead. There's always this constructive way of saying, how can we do better? How can we look better? And I think I'm very hopeful that, after the pronouncement of the IRP 2025 in the coming weeks, with Eskom's, continuous transition, we get to now focus on some of the other priorities, focusing on going green. Just yesterday, Eskom launched the electric vehicles, training vehicles, the start of a new journey. This is unheard of generally in state-owned enterprises. So it's very comforting. And if you really look at the focus on reducing emissions, ensuring we become a very responsible, a company in this country, for me, it's very, very exciting times to be part of Eskom. Really looking forward to the coming years.
And of course, just an added to that, a credit to also Dr. Hussein Ramokgopa, the Minister of Electricity. When, of course, that portfolio was announced, I was skeptical. 2 years on, it seems that he is doing a stellar job in of course, keeping the lights on. Mr. Shunmugam, we've got about 2 minutes. I asked the billion-rand question. How close or how far are we in ending load shedding on a permanent basis?
So for us, I think, the one thing we've said consistently, Medupi 4 has come back, Kusile 6 is online, we get Kuberg back, I think we go through this summer period, we'll have at least 2 winters and 2 summers behind us. And I think if there's any pronouncements to be made, clearly when we do the winter outlook, Eskom, I think, will be more bold and assertive in making those pronouncements. But from where I'm sitting, if we sustain this continued performance, the recent weeks have been very good. The support we've got from from government, from our shareholder, from our board, is all very good in enabling this environment. So I would like to maybe leave by saying that when we do pronounce on the winter outlook, I'm sure we will, with more assertiveness, make those pronouncements. But it's looking very, very positive. As you've started at the beginning, this summer outlook, even if we touch breakdown levels of 15,000 with our planned maintenance, there's no load shedding actually planned.
Eric Shunmugam, absolute pleasure having you on. Thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to have you, of course, when that winter outlook will be announced. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for us. Thank you.
That's Eric Shunmugam, the Eskom General Manager in the Office of the Group Executive for Generation. Up next, well, the BRICS members, they're trying to plot a way forward with regards to dealing with the high costs or the high number of the Donald Trump tariffs. I'm going to be speaking with Dr. Rüdiger Thesselmann after the break to discuss what do the BRICS members do in terms of that. Do stay tuned.